You're listening to the Fertility Docs Uncensored podcast, featuring insight on all things fertility from some of the top-rated doctors around America. Whether you're struggling to conceive or just planning for your future family, we're here to guide you every step of the way.
This podcast is sponsored by Receptiva Diagnostics. Receptiva Diagnostics is a powerful test used to help detect inflammatory conditions on the uterine lining, most commonly associated with endometriosis, and may be the cause of failed implantation or recurrent pregnancy loss. Take advantage by learning more about this condition at receptivadx.com and how you can get tested and treated, providing a new pathway to achieving a successful pregnancy. Receptiva Diagnostics, because the journey is worth it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fertility Docs Uncensored. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Carrie Bedient from the Fertility Center of Las Vegas, and I am joined by my two favorite, fantastic, funny ladies, Dr. Abby Eblen from Nashville Fertility Center.
Hi, everybody.
And Dr. Susan Hudson from Texas Fertility Center. And we are very happily joined today by Richard Kellner, who is the founder for the PKD-Free Alliance.
Thank you for having us.
Very glad to have you, Richard. And then also Natasha Rogina, who is the chief spokesmom for the PKD-Free Alliance. And so we are very excited to have both of you guys with us today because it gives us a chance to share stories that we otherwise don't always get to share on here. And so thank you for being with us, for both of you.
Thank you.
So as we were kind of going into this, we were talking about what irrational fears we have, kind of based off the fact that Richard is out of Park City, and we were talking about skiing, and I would say mine, and frankly, I don't think this one's irrational. I don't ski for anything because I grew up in Arizona and I live in Las Vegas, and you will not catch me dead on, I guess maybe you will catch me dead on.
You're probably dead.
But you were talking about how you went skiing today and how that brought up some other things in your mind that doesn't normally come up.
Yeah, well, I have a very big day tomorrow. That's been something that's been 25 years in the making.
Wow.
Yeah, and pretty much the only thing that could blow it up would have been my not skiing properly today. I was quite cautious while I was out there today.
So were you doing just the greens today then?
Yeah, we went pretty easy. Groomers only. Nowhere near a tree.
No mishaps coming off the ski lifts. You didn't face plant into anything, which is one of my also, I think, very rational fears if I were to get on skis, that I would just get off and plunk.
No, we took it easy today. So
well, good.
Okay.
Excellent.
What about you, Natasha?
I would say my biggest irrational fear is a car wash. I panic when I put the wheels on the little...
Yeah, I hate that too. I'm with you there. That always makes me nervous too.
Yep. I mean, I've been through a lot in this life already, and that is one thing I just still haven't mastered.
Do you have a primary event that spurred on this fear? Like, did you get stuck in a car wash as a kid where you were in it for half an hour watching the soap suds swirl, or?
Nope, I just panic every time I have to line up the vehicle. And I'm a really good driver, so I don't know why. It's just...
So once you get in, though, you're okay. It's not like you're scared of the soap suds or anything. It's just lining your wheels up. I kind of
lining up, because the guys at the college are yelling at you if it's not straight, and I just don't like it.
Yeah.
Even though I'm a middle school dean and I get yelled at literally but yeah, it's just...
Carrie, what's your irrational fear?
You guys might have to come back to me for that. I was...
she has no fear.
I was so entertained by... Well, let's not go that far. I was so entertained by the thought of a fear of car washes. I have a fear by proxy. One of my really good friends is afraid of meat on the bone. Like, if she's going to eat a steak, she would eat a fillet that is not on the bone, as opposed to a T-bone or a ribeye or something like that. And so there was one year for her birthday that we made her a cake that was a giant bone made out of cake. And so that's probably the biggest irrational fear that comes to my mind, although that is not my particular irrational fear. What about you girls?
My irrational fear is open-spaced staircases. So where it doesn't have the back part.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it started when I was little. I remember being in some sort of business. It was either like a showroom for furniture or a car showroom or something like that. And I'm an only child, so I went everywhere my parents went. And I remember sitting on a staircase and my legs dangling out the other side of it. And I think that was the first time I had the thought of this might not be a good idea. And it has just perpetuated since. I'm fine going down, but going up, I can do it, but it's not something that I'm comfortable with at all.
Your irrational fear leads to my irrational fear, and that's heights. So we were just in Italy, and I got to go to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and the stairs were spiral, which was a little creepy. They were very well-worn stairs, so you had to be real careful. But I just always have to inch up to the edge, and it feels stupid doing it, but it's like, okay, slow, deep breaths. It'll be okay. But it was pretty. It was pretty once I got to the edge and looked over.
Second one, Carrie, I can take this one for you. I also
Yeah,
don't like
do it.
flyovers. So when you're on highways and you're doing the big flyovers, not good. Not good.
Lots of those
I can do it. I can do it if I get stuck. But let me tell you, there are certain cities that my Waze is trained to help me exit so I can exit, just go through the light, get back on the next highway that I need to. Let me tell you, that is 3 minutes worth it in my life.
I didn't know that about you, Susan. I'm glad to know that now.
I will remember that the next time we're traveling together.
RMA of New York is a global leader in state-of-the-art reproductive medicine, serving as Division of Reproductive Endocrinology and Infertility at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Led by an integrated team of physicians and scientists, RMA of New York is renowned for its pioneering research in the field and for delivering high IVF success rates. With locations across Manhattan, Brooklyn, Westchester, and Long Island, RMA of New York has helped thousands to build the families of their dreams for more than 2 decades and counting.
Okay, so now that we've gotten that very important discussion out of the way,
Those irrational fears out of the way.
irrational fears out of the way, Susan, what's our question today?
Okay, our question for the day is, I love your insightful, interesting, intelligent, and inviting podcast. Love your alliteration.
Alliteration. I like that.
It brought me comfort and hope as I came to terms in needing IVF. I'm 34, low AMH of 0.6, AFC 12, hypothalamic amenorrhea. My 35-year-old sister wants to freeze her eggs, AMH 1.83, AFC 30. Yeah, life is unfair. I did 2 rounds of IVF with 15 eggs retrieved, all mature both times. Round 1, 9 fertilized, 3 blasts, all euploid. On the second round, we added low-dose oral steroids and HGH during stems, yielding 10 fertilized, 7 blasts, 6 euploid. If you are just freezing eggs, how do you improve quality each round? I had the same number of mature eggs in both rounds, but drastically different blast rates. Should my sister add steroids and HGH for her egg freeze?
This feels like those word problems that you got in high school of if train A is going here and train B is doing this, and they're having steak for dinner in the dining car. When is the conductor's next birthday?
You're saying they don't really relate. Is that what you're kind of alluding to, Carrie?
No, well, it's just a lot of information that I see how it all links together and it's helpful, but it's a word problem.
I think what she's saying is she has seen how you can have different results cycle to cycle and how evident in when you're doing embryos. And if somebody's freezing eggs, how do they get the best quality egg when you don't know what's going to happen down the road? And unfortunately, that's the problem with freezing eggs. I mean,
if we knew that, we would be living in Park City and selling our business and not having to work if we knew the answer to that question.
So when you're going through a stim to freeze eggs, the main outcome that we have is a number of mature eggs. And you can sort of tell by how they look, but really you can't. And so it's very frustrating because there's no genetic testing that you can do on the eggs. You can't just look at them and see this egg is going to be good and make an embryo and this one isn't, because if we could, we would all be geniuses and there would be no extra embryos because we would know which ones were going to stick and which ones weren't. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And so it comes down to a numbers game of how many eggs can you get so that in the future you can build the size of family you want. And for egg freezing, we do focus a lot on the trigger because that greatly influences maturity. And of course, that particular decision is influenced by your age and how many follicles you have and your hyperstimulation risk. But other than that, protocol changes. I mean, a lot of us recommend CoQ10, but doing growth.
We don't really know that it works.
Like if they worked all the time and were reliable, we would do them all the time because we want nothing more than for this to work for you. So that's kind of a non-answer.
The one thing I would add in, Brigham and Women's has an egg freezing calculator, and anybody can look that up. And it really, the only two pieces of information asked are age and number of eggs. And so your sister can at least get some idea of, after her first stem, what her chances are of having one baby versus two babies versus three babies. And if she's somebody who wants three babies, she's going to need to freeze more eggs, but it'll at least give her some sort of analytic data that can really help her nail down if she really needs to do another stimulated cycle again or not.
I do agree with the CoQ10. That's something easy. I mean, I'm a fan of growth hormone, but I only use it in people who I think growth hormone is either proven indicated, meaning they've had a bad cycle and we're trying to improve quality of eggs and embryos, or someone that I'm really, really concerned about. And that's usually somebody who either has a really high FSH or someone who is generally 41 and above. And so I probably wouldn't spend $400 a vial on growth hormone for an egg freezing cycle outside of those realms.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right. So let's get into the meat of today's discussion, which is talking about PKD. Rich, let's start with you first. So you're the founder of this organization. Tell us what PKD is and how you came to be where you are today with respect to founding this alliance and making it grow.
Sure. PKD is the largest cause of kidney failure in adults under 50.
What does PKD stand for?
Polycystic kidney disease. So it is a genetic condition, a dominant gene. So if you have the gene, you're not a carrier, you have the disease, which means that you've got cysts on your kidneys, other parts of your body. As time progresses, it crowds out ordinary kidney function, and in many cases causes kidney failure by the age of 50. And if one parent in the couple has the disease, there's a 50% chance that each child of that couple is going to have PKD.
So what kind of impact does this have on kids' lives before? I mean, if they're more likely to have kidney failure by age 50, how does that impact their life on the way up to that point? Most of us would think, okay, kidney failure, it's fine, and then it just peters out. But is it a slow decline? Is it something that happens rapidly? Like, what do these people's lives look like up until that point?
Yeah. So in most cases, and certainly my family's experience with it, you get well into your 40s, perfectly healthy kidney function, right? All of us have a spare and excess kidney function. We'll talk about this later, but you don't need both. So you have reserve capacity. So even though the disease is progressing, there's really no impact. So, part of the challenge with this has been the medical profession for a long time has been communicating with families with PKD. There's nothing you can do about it. Don't think about it until you have kidney failure. Just regular blood checks, watch your sodium, and watch your blood pressure. And until your kidney function starts declining, which is typically in your late 40s, there's nothing to do. And that's part of the myth that we're trying to change, because as you guys know, with what the pre-implantation genetic testing and IVF that you guys have been able to do for over 20 years, there's no need for another child to be born with this disease. So if we could
Absolutely
change the medical profession's thinking on this and start communicating with the young families, letting them know that this is an option, we could prevent this disease from being passed down. And by the way, that child that doesn't have the disease, it's over, right? That child doesn't need to worry about it, thinking about it. All future generations of the family are out of harm's way.
Richard, I have a quick question for you. Isn't there also an autosomal recessive form of polycystic kidney disease as well?
There is. So that's a recessive gene. Both parents need to have it. there's a 1 in 4 chance when both parents have it of it being passed down. That is a much more acute form
Really?
of the disease, and it's horrific. In most cases, children with ARPKD don't make it to their first birthday.
Wow.
So
But
Yeah.
to your
So
point, if parents get tested on the front end, it can end the disease if parents get tested and know that they
that's correct.
carry it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can make sure it doesn't get passed down.
So, Natasha, can you share us a little bit about your story and what brought you to be thinking about doing things like IVF and PGT?
Yeah, so when my husband and I were dating in college, I had just graduated college and we were pretty serious and I wanted to know if I had PKD before potentially marrying this man and having that 50% chance of passing it down.
Because one of your parents had it.
Yes, so my mom and my grandma and my maternal aunt and my great
Really?
grandma. So it's been going through my family for a long time. So at 21, I got a ultrasound done of my kidneys. It was very evident that there were cysts all over my kidneys and liver. So at that point, they were able to diagnose me with PKD. Fast forward a few years, I moved to Denver, Colorado, and met with a nephrologist at the University of Colorado. And he had just mentioned, when you're ready to start family planning, I have a patient undergoing IVF to eliminate the possibility of passing down the disease. And at that point, I only thought IVF was for people with fertility problems. Never really, looked into it much at that point. But as the years went on and we were ready to start our family, I knew that if I could eliminate it and have that disease end with me, that there was absolutely no other option for me.
Yeah. And
My
Natasha was
husband, go ahead.
fortunate enough to have a nephrologist that was in touch, aware of it, and communicated it to her. And we're hoping that all nephrologists will start getting out there and with that message, but we have a long way to go.
Exciting news from Fertility Docs Uncensored. Our long-awaited book, The IVF Blueprint, is now available on Amazon. Go now to pre-order your copy to learn everything you need to know about IVF, egg freezing, and embryo transfer. Yeah, so I started this journey. So I started looking up top fertility centers in Denver. I ended up at Conceptions with Dr. Mark Bush, and we started this process. So it began with a huge blood panel to see which diseases potentially carry, what my husband would potentially carry. Obviously, PKD lit up on that board, and we started from there. Natera Genetics in California was able to make a probe based on me and my mother's DNA, and that's where we began our journey.
Hey, Natasha, could you mention a little bit more about, you said you needed your mother's DNA. Could you kind of explain a little bit about that? Because I think a lot of people don't understand that can be 3 to 6 month process.
Yeah, so it really started when that blood panel came back. I actually had like 2 variants of unknown significance for my PKD genes, which frightened us because if one started with me, we would not know which one was disease causing. So thankfully, both my parents were willing and able to submit blood samples, and they were able to just figure out that other PKD variant of unknown significance came from my dad. My dad does not have PKD, so we were able to then target the gene that my mom passed on to me. And that's where we created our probe. And that process took several months. I think we submitted blood samples in March, and I didn't get the green light for my egg retrieval until November.
I think it's important for people who are thinking about having what's called pre-implantation genetic testing, PGT, and this is specifically PGT-M for monogenetic causes of disease, to understand that if you know you have a disease, sometimes people just like you, they're first diagnosed with the disease and they don't have their genetics done. And so it's important to get that genetic testing done because that's the first thing we need. And then, of course, checking for other recessive, I'm sure they did the whole Natera panel, which they're fantastic, to make sure there's nothing else hiding because you'd feel awful silly to do PGT-M for your polycystic kidney disease and then find out you and your partner are potentially carriers for 2 recessive conditions. I actually had somebody recently that both partners, I had 2 matches for
Wow.
PGT-M. I mean,
That's
the odds
crazy.
about that happening are crazy.
Yeah, I've never had that so far.
But it happens. It happens.
Yeah, I ended up having there was 4 that popped up on that panel that were scary if my husband were to also, but he's perfect and had nothing. So
Can you talk a little bit about how when you did go through and when you have an autosomal dominant condition, we always get worried because we always say it's a funnel effect. Not every egg fertilizes, not every egg grows, not every egg is genetically normal. And then at the other end of the funnel, you have one more drop off, and that's you've got an autosomal dominant condition. So can you mention about how that affected the number of embryos that you had remaining that were normal?
yeah, so I started the journey. My egg retrieval, I think, yielded 76 eggs.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
That's
I might have
awesome.
broke the record.
So people that are listening, most people don't get 76 eggs.
No one gets 76 eggs except
No.
for Natasha.
Yeah.
So by the time everything went through, we had embryos are created, the last group, we came out with 6 PKD-free embryos. So they did not have the disease and they were genetically sound. So those were incredible numbers. We sent
Yes. That was
initially
amazing.
13 off for testing and 6 came back genetically sound and without the disease.
That's
For,
great.
for our listeners, I think we could easily say that most people would go through 4 retrievals to get 80 eggs under the best of conditions. And also remembering that each of these embryos that Natasha now has a 60 to 70% chance, each one of them, in yielding a pregnancy. So when you're thinking about going through this and trying to figure out how many egg retrievals I might need to do, it's very common, obviously not in Natasha's circumstance, but it's very common to need to do more than one retrieval if you're planning on having multiple children.
So when you found out that you had embryos to use, how did that change anything? Was there ever a point during this whole process as you were getting diagnosed thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm never going to have kids," and then to turn around and go through this and all of a sudden you've got 6 embryos to work with?
It was definitely an emotional journey because I remember my grandma when I was growing up, always saying she felt guilty for passing it down to 2 out of the 3 of her daughters. And then the nephrologist constantly telling her, oh, don't worry, your daughter, by the time your daughter has children, so your grandchildren, they're not going to have to worry. We're going to have a cure. We're going to have all these different advances in technology. And here we are all those years later. And my mom had a transplant at 50 and I'm 30 right now and have normal function, but I know that's what my future is. So being able to know that I had these 6 embryos to start with, we had a chance of, having potentially 2, 3 children out of that batch. So that is what we're working towards right now. And I don't have to have that guilt feeling. And not to say that people don't have to do IVF for this, right? It is a choice, but I just want to encourage people to know that it is an option. Those other embryos, whether they were genetically sound and had the disease, I just wanted to end it with me.
So how did the PKD-Free Alliance play into this? How did the two of you meet? How did the PKD-Free Alliance impact you? And how did all this come together?
Yeah, so I started back in March of 2022 when I was starting that genetic testing. I started an Instagram page called PKD Ends With Me. And I just wanted to share my journey about this and see if I can help other people along the way. And later that summer, PKD Free reached out to me on Instagram and they had this 100 PKD Free baby initiative and that they were interested in working together. And it's been great ever since. So that is where we met. We met on Instagram, and Richard and, his foundation are doing incredible things. And they supported me with that, initial $3,000 funding for that PGT-M probe. And right now they're helping me through our next transfer cycle.
And to start with, Natasha's the original crusader. She started her PKD Ends With Me initiative on Instagram in March. We launched our initiative in July of 2022. And we found Natasha, and, she's a real hero because Natasha and her husband, forgive me for sharing, but they went into debt. Insurance didn't cover it to have that first PKD-free child. We helped pay down a little bit of the debt. And, we're making sure that as they consider future children, Natasha's not going to have to go into debt again. to have more PKD-free children. And that's what we want to do. We want to create the awareness that this opportunity is available, but we also want to make it accessible. And that's where we help out with financial support.
So, what type of resources does the PKD Alliance have for people who have PKD in their families?
Right. So we've got 2 grant programs. One of them, everybody with PKD is eligible, because what we find is that some people have insurance coverage for IVF, but interestingly, even if you have insurance coverage for IVF, they very rarely cover the genetic testing. So we'll pay $3,000 towards the genetic testing of the embryos when you get to that stage if you don't have insurance, and that seems to be pretty common. We also have an expanded grant program that provides up to $9,000 of coverage for the IVF, the genetic testing, and we also have some discounts from some partner for centers. And when you combine those two, one round of IVF basically cut the out-of-pocket cost in half.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
So, Rich, how did you enter this world in general? What is your story? What brought you to found the PKD-Free Alliance?
Yeah, so I've been dealing with PKD for about 35 years, a little more than that, actually. My late wife, Joanne, her mother had PKD. When I first met Joanne at 20, her mother was on dialysis in between transplants. When I got married, kind of knew that this was going to be the outcome, and everybody's saying, don't worry about it. So we didn't. And I knew at 23, when I got married, that I'd be donating a kidney. And sure enough, at 49, Joanne's kidneys failed. I donated a kidney to her, but both of my kids have it. I have a sister-in-law who's been on dialysis for 11 years, hasn't wanted to go down the transplant route. My wife and her sister both have it. Both of my kids have it. My nephew has it. My niece was spared. She was the only one.
Wow.
But my grandchildren won't. And I discovered this during COVID when it became apparent that the kidney I donated to Joanne, donated kidneys aren't a permanent solution. They only last for so long. So Joanne needed a second transplant. And I'm like, all right, I don't have another one to give this time. And is this going to be the reality for my kids and my future generations? And I started looking for options. The doctors were telling me there's nothing you could do. I started looking, and then we found this, and it wasn't that hard to find. The issue is I was told not to look.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
By quality doctor after quality doctor, there's nothing you could do. So why am I looking? And that's what we want to change. And after my wife passed, I'm like, my grandchildren aren't going to have this disease, but I need to do more with this information. And we are determined to eradicate this disease. The foundation's been around for 3 years. This initiative has been around for 2 years. We've already had 140 applications.
Wow.
We have 72 families actively going through IVF towards having a PKD-free baby. 9 babies already born, including Juliana, Natasha's baby, 11 pregnancies, 2 more coming in April, 2 more babies. And the momentum is building, and opportunities like this to create the awareness going to help us help more families.
This is truly a labor of love. If somebody wanted to either get your resources or donate to the Alliance, what is the best way for them to get information about the PKD Alliance?
Great. Yeah, thank you. Our website is pkdfree.org. And if they come to pkdfree.org, all the information about our programs are there. There's an online form to apply, but everybody who applies, we immediately contact, and there's, personal outreach to every family that we're helping. We recognize that this is a deeply personal, and private thing. So we're in touch with every family to help share information. And now that the community is beginning to grow, we've got other moms that have been through the process, such as Natasha and a few others, that are also willing to be resources to talk to new moms that are following in their footsteps to continue it. Because, Natasha, you spoke about this when we spoke early on. There tons of fertility support groups or IVF support groups, but it's largely families that are just dealing with fertility problems. And it's different when you don't have fertility issues, but you're going through it.
Yeah.
So we're working to build that community to make sure that we can keep helping families as they come through it.
Tasha, how was your experience working with the PKD-Free Alliance as you were starting to go through this? Because it sounds like you were already pretty vocal, which I'm guessing is part of the reason why you are now the chief spokesmom. But how was your experience going through it with this new group of people who you didn't have to explain anything to, who already knew what PKD was and how it impacted lives and why it's a big deal?
I think when I started my page, I was really hoping that I can inspire one other person to go through this and have one more PKD free child in this world and end it in one more family. And I think when I posted one of my stories one day, I had a sorority sister reach out from college and said, like, hey, you've really inspired me to do this for a cancer gene that was running through her family. And then I realized, wow, this is much bigger than PKD. If we can really start eradicating some of these diseases by just
Absolutely.
passing them down because we can't figure out how to end them in any other way, that's when I realized, wow, this is important and I want to keep spreading that message. As the PKD-Free Alliance is giving me this platform to come out and speak with the media and different organizations, different podcasts. And that is my goal, is to just spread this word. And I'm an open book. I've talked to people all over the country. I constantly get, Instagram messages every week about moms just curious about, how did it affect their kidney function? What was their protocol when they went through IVF or when I went through IVF? So it's just been really fun to help others. And I'm just really honored to be part of this team.
I have a question for both of you in that I have had PKD patients in the past where they have elected, and it's usually, for some reason, it's been all the male partner that I have seen. But I've had several where I have offered them PGT-M and they're like, no, thanks, we're good. I'm totally healthy. This is fine. And it's that balancing act of, as a doctor, I don't want to come down when they're already having to go through fertility treatment. And these are patients who came for infertility, not for the PKD. I don't want to hit them when they're down and saying, I'm really sorry, sir, but this is going to significantly
Big
impact your
deal.
life. And oh, by the way, you're going to need a kidney transplant. Otherwise, your kidneys are going to fail. It is my place to say that, but it's also not, because that's kicking somebody when they're down and just piling that other information on and trying to make them see, hey, not only are you having to go through IVF, but this terrible thing is going to happen. How do you propose that we approach that as physicians to say, no, this is why I'm offering this to you. I'm not just offering it to you for funsies. There's a reasoning behind it.
Yeah, it's a personal decision, and this isn't going to be for everyone. I mean, what we are finding is that most people, when they learn about it and they understand about it, they get on board, especially when there's been a family history
Yeah. That makes a big
of
difference
kid-
usually.
of kidney failure and transplant. And so they've seen the suffering and they want to end that suffering. So the reality is, if they don't have the family history of it, because there are some forms of the disease where you have it and the progression is so slow that kidneys are not failing, right? In my wife's family, it's a relatively aggressive form, and we know what we know what we're looking at. So I would imagine the patients where, oh, I have PKD, but they don't feel the urgency to end it. It's probably less aggressive in that family. I think you still make them aware that, hey, this is an option. Point them to us to get more information. But then it's a choice. And listen, we've had a few families come to us older, and there's one family in particular. They only got 3 embryos and all 3 had PKD. And I was thrilled when they chose, well, we're still going to have children. It's not a reason not to have kids. This is an option to provide that generational health. I couldn't imagine life having not had my wife or my kids. This isn't ARPKD where the kid doesn't survive the first year. But again, knowing what this disease does and the impact, if you've got the opportunity, not pass it on. We do think that most people will opt in, but completely respect those that opt out. But again, the key is to give them the information so that they can make an informed decision.
Absolutely. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your stories with us and for helping us bring awareness to this
Absolutely.
so that now our patients, if they know somebody with PKD, if they're struggling with PKD, if it's in their family at all, they now know that they can go to the PKD-Free Alliance webpage and get in touch with a community that is very familiar with it, potentially with some grant support to help them get through this process. That is a wonderful thing that you are both doing and working on. And it's so heartwarming to hear stories like that of people being good people and helping each other out. So
Absolutely.
thanks for being good human beings.
We need more human beings like you guys around.
Yeah.
You too.
One thing I learned, I donated a kidney 12 years ago, and it changed me as a person. My wife was super giving, and when I was able to give that to her, life really started giving back. And, when she passed, I leaned into, I could be bitter, right? Or I could be better. I could figure out a way to give back. This is it. And I got to tell you something. This journey just continues to give back to me. So,
Tears in my eyes.
I know, I'm crying too. What a great legacy to leave. I'm sure your family's very proud of what you've done. That's amazing.
thank you.
You guys are wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. To our audience, thank you so much for listening. And please subscribe to Apple Podcasts so you can have next Tuesday's episode pop up automatically for you and start to hear more wonderful stories like this. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. That really helps us to spread reliable information and help as many people as possible.
You can also visit us on fertilitydocsuncensored.com to submit specific questions you have and sign up for our email list.
As always, this podcast is intended for entertainment and is not a substitute for medical advice from your own physician. Subscribe, sign up for emails, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
This podcast is sponsored by Receptiva Diagnostics. Receptiva Diagnostics is a powerful test that can help detect inflammatory conditions on the uterine lining that might be preventing you from becoming pregnant or staying pregnant. If you have experienced implantation failure or recurrent pregnancy loss, ask your doctor about Receptiva Diagnostics testing. If found, uterine inflammation can be treated, providing a new pathway to achieving a successful pregnancy. Receptiva Diagnostics, because the journey is worth it.